Hi guys, welcome back to part 5 of the webbing series. Apologies again, it's been about 4 months since my last video on this series itself. So again, apologies for that. As mostly with my channel, most of the videos lately actually been live streamed, so I hope you've enjoyed those sort of things. But they do go a bit off the deep end kind sometimes. But yeah, apologies for the delay. So in this part 5, we're looking at 58 pattern webbing in its earlier stages. So this will be a mixture of first and second issue 58 pattern webbing, and then the next episode, part 6, will be looking at 58 pattern in its later stages, so 1970s 80s kind of thing. This is very much of the 1960s period, of a mixture of first and second issue 58 as a general thing, just because I don't have a full set of first issue, which I would love to, but they're getting a bit more tricky to find, which is a shame because they're not actually that rare, but it's just a case of things dry up off the market and they don't come out of collections that often, really. There were a lot made, but you do find bits in here. We will look at one item of first issue and some attributes of first issue which stayed on to second issue and which were then updated during the third issue of 58. Again, we will look at that in the next part when I get around to making that one, but hopefully that wouldn't be as much longer as it has been with this one. Again, 4 months. Again, apologies. So we're looking to that. Looking to this now, I should say. So this will be sort of mid-60s. Basically, the general kit during training, and obviously what was the fighting order or marching order, I should say, of 58 webbing, which wasn't really done within the field. Just to say, because one of the items was generally seen as a useless piece of junk by a lot of guys, including myself, and was generally used for either carrying the equipment itself or just in transit. That wasn't really used for anything else bar moving from barrack to barrack, because it's generally used as a large pack, and it is the large pack I'm talking about, was it's quite useless for you. But we'll get into that in a bit anyway, and then we'll get onto the video. So see you in a bit. Now we have it in front of us. So basically it's, if you've seen any episodes of my channel or on other people's channels, or seen just 58 before, or if you own it yourself, you roughly know the general layout. But for those unknowing, it's basically based on a yoke system of the yoke and the belt. You don't need both to wear the equipment itself, but the belt is the main focus of what everything goes around. So without the belt, you can't really wear the equipment, as I said. And that could either be using the standard 58 belt, or you see roll pin belts being used, especially later, but as a standard, the 58 pattern belt, which in one form or another is still being made today in like a nylon. Excuse me. But beside that, we'll get into the main thing. So, as basics, you have the yoke system, which has pull tabs, so you can tighten it up or loosen depending on the wearer. The belt itself, which has basically reinforced holes all the way around to accompany loosening or tightening the actual length of the belt, or lengthening or reducing the size, I should say, to suit the wearer. Has a Mills style buckle system with keepers, or fasteners, or however you want to call it, to keep it in place. The pouches, basic pouches, ammunition pouches, mag pouches, many different terms used, but basic pouches, sort of the general thing, which is sort of accompanying over from 37 and 44 pattern webbing. You would see the first issues of 58 webbing, I should say, start seeing its sort of first service in deployments around the world, with a mixture of this being used alongside 44 pattern, for example, in Borneo, for example. Obviously it was being introduced into the British Army before then, but its first sort of use in, say, within a combat role was Borneo, and then obviously aid and so on and so forth. But I've said from 58 onwards, this began to make its way into the British Army, filtering its way up, even up until sort of the mid-60s. So you still see some units who have a mixture of, say, 37 pattern still in service with their regular troops, or well, around about 61, 61, 62, 63, and eventually this becomes to be the mainstay. As I said, like so the basic pouches. So I'll have a quick look at a first pattern, just so I don't have to take it off the webbing. So this is a first issue pattern pouch. You would have seen this in my previous video, focusing on a member of the 1st Lieutenant Hampshires in Northern Ireland in the early 70s. So this is basically the first pattern. So fiberboard, so reinforced sides in the actual flap of the actual pouch. This is the left-hand pouch, so it has the bayonet scabbard, the frog, I should say, attached to the pouch itself, as all 58 did, apart from some of the very, very late stuff in the late 80s has these on to accompany the SLR bayonet. The D-rings at the bottom are for use to attaching to the poncho roll, which again we'll get into in a minute. As I said, the early ones, so the first and second issue ones, are very slim, so they could fit maybe 2 magazines of L1A1 SLR mags, so 2 20-round mags, or maybe 2 L4 Bren mags, or depending on whatever you want to put in there. But they're quite slender, and they sit straight, as you can see there, straight on the belt. I'll do some close-up shots at the end, but they sit straight on the belt. This one specifically is dated, if I can see the actual date. Let me go in blind. I think that's 68, I think this one's 68, I believe. But it's still in very, very good condition. And also in all of the first and second issue 58 pattern pouches, basic pouches, they all have this like pull tab kind of thing. Well, they're all a quick release design, as is most of what is on the equipment of 58. But in the actual inside of the pouch itself, there's like a tab here with a buckle. So basically this can be loosened or tightened. And basically this is so when you open the pouch, you can have it tight enough. So when you open the pouch, it lifts up the magazines inside to allow easy access and easier basically to get them out of the pouch when you're opening it. This was omitted from the design in the 3rd issue, which again we will get onto with our own video itself. But this is focused on the 1st and 2nd, which were basically integrated within roughly the same time. And obviously 3rd issue basically comes out at the end of the 1960s, and again begins to filter in, and then becomes the mainstay of equipment into the 1970s, and then becomes almost the primary used variant for the rest of the Cold War until the introduction of PLCE in the 1990s. Excuse me. But again, that's something for a later video. But getting back to this, as I said, reinforced sides. This will be the same on the kidney pouches, which are on the back, which we'll get to in a minute. They have reinforced sides to the actual flap itself. This feature was omitted on the 2nd issue, as you can see here, which does not have the. But apart from the stiffeners and the reinforced sides, that is the only difference between this and that, and the 2nd issue. And some minor little things regarding, say, on the poncho roll, but again, we'll get onto that when we go round. So that's the 1st issue. Another item, which again we'll get onto in a second, is the water bottle pouch. That changes into the 3rd issue, or sorry, the 2nd issue, 3rd issue kind of thing. But again, we'll get onto that in a second. So you see the yoke here. You can probably see just about. Again, I get some close-ups with this. There's hooks here. These are from the large pack. As you probably know, I spoke about the large pack briefly in the intro to the video. We'll get onto that in a minute. But it comes so in basically 1-inch straps with buckles and tighteners and fasteners, etc. Comes over the shoulder, across the shoulder parts of the yoke, and hooks onto D-rings here and here. And as I said, you could fasten and tighten this up. So coming round to this side, and I'll spin round here, if this doesn't want to fall on me. Hopefully it doesn't, but the shovel is catching. That's fun. So yeah, so as you can see on the side, we have the water bottle. So this is the early type. We briefly saw this again in the previous video. On here, so that one there. It has a twist lock mechanism, twist, and it's open. I absolutely love these pouches. These are very, very much liked by guys. The only thing is these are slightly narrower than what comes out in the later issues with just the buckle. Excuse me, but these are very much desired because it's quick, it's easy to get this in and out. But when you introduce a cup to this pouch, it tends to get a bit snug. For example, there's a cup in this one. This one in itself actually is a commercially made 58 pouch. So very, very strange in that, because that's sort of what you don't see very often, but it's commercially made, so it's actually slightly wider. And basically it's the size of the later pattern, later issue pouches. So this one's a bit easier to get in and out, but as this goes, this one's a bit more of a struggle to get in and out when you've got the cup in there as well. But apart from that, great bit of kit. Very, very easy, but again, simplify it and also just change things. They changed from this, which I don't know why they moved away from this style of fastener and went to a buckle, considering they still kept this same fastener on the pouches, as I'll show when we go round to the other side. Actually, we could probably see actually here, actually, let's just say, here we go. So on the side of the magazine pouches, you have this, which is for the Energa grenade launcher. So that will go in here. It was adopted for a very brief time, and then was just basically withdrawn, but they kept the pouch, and that stayed on until the late 80s on 58 issue webbing. And was just, and was used for many different things, knife, fork, spoon, anything you really wanted, maybe a flashbang or I don't know. But they would keep those in there. But as I said, this was the Energa grenade launcher. Again, when it was withdrawn from service, they kept this pouch, so I don't see why they withdrew this style of fastener on the water bottle to make it a buckle, when this is far superior. This is so much quicker, to quickly done, and that's in. And I find it much more secure, because it's a metal fastener rather than a tab, like a canvas tab on a metal buckle. But it's just one of those things, and it's probably for cheapness. But again, they're already keeping it on the main. It's just one of those weird things. But yeah, that's the water bottle, and in there should be the 58 water bottle itself. So this is an early one. So this one is a 1964 dated one. You can always tell the early ones either by the date or the fact they're green. The cap is a later one just because the caps themselves for the early water bottles are very rare. And I don't know have one of the cups. Again, that's another rare one. The first what was meant to go with this, with the 58 pattern equipment in the first place, specifically on the first issue, and there wasn't meant to be a water bottle or pouch or anything. It was meant to be a square rectangular style water bottle with cup and that and everything. That was meant to go in the kidney pouches on the back. So these, it was meant to fit in there. There wasn't meant to be one of these at all. So it was meant to be its own type of thing. But sort of, I think, more level-headed heads prevailed. And they thought, no, actually we need a water bottle that goes into a pouch, easily accessible. You don't have to get into your kidney pouch at the back, especially because if you've got your large pack on, supposedly, you can't really get access to it. But that was more of a trials thing than anything. And then this was subsequently thought of. So that's the water bottle itself. Very easy. You see, especially later on, even during the Falklands, again, we'll get into that later, guys swapping out kidney pouches for loads of these, or obviously the later style ones as well, whatever. You see occasionally as well, with the early parts when these weren't being issued, guys still using 44 pattern water bottles because they were very good, and they're easy to access. And you see guys a lot replacing the later style 58 pattern water bottle pouches with 44 because, again, they're easier to access and the bottles are generally better because you can cook with the cups as well because they're metal, not with the 58 because they're plastic. And I'll quickly show one of the cups because, again, this is all part of this equipment. So this is one of the cups. So again, this one is black. The early ones would be in green. Should have been anyway, as far as I'm aware. Very, very good, great, and everything. And the good thing that the plastic, which means they're better with the heat in that, so you can hold it better without the metal one. The metal ones generally they transfer heat more, which means they're a bit more difficult to hold and more uncomfortable to hold. But again, the downside to that is you can't cook with them like you can with the metal ones. And here's one of the later black ones. This one is 1982 dated. So, and then this one has the later. I think this is for the S10 actually cap, but because the older one was leaking, but it's for drinking so you can, when you're wearing the respirator. But apart from that, that's beside the point. But yeah, this is a later one, so 64 and 82. So basically, what, 18 years difference between the two. Excuse me. Okay, moving around, we'll switch around to the back. Here you can see the main sort of square rig or rectangle rig that basically is what you'll be carrying into battle, so to speak. Battle order, marching order, whatever it may be, but generally a marching order kind of thing. So you have your entrenching tool, so you'll either have your shovel, your small shovel, or you'll have your pick, and the pick handle will go into where the shovel is secured now, and then the pick head will go into this basically pocket on the poncho roll. And you see a lot of guys, obviously they say this is marching order kind of thing. There is a same fastener on the back. Again, we'll quickly cut away after we've gone round, and I'll show how that secures as well without the large pack on. On the subject of the large pack, it is probably one of the most terribly designed packs I've ever seen. It uses a hook system to secure it to the equipment. It doesn't have its own suspension system in that sense. You can't wear it on its own unless you jerry-rig something up. But again, that involves alterations to it to then use it properly. My personal opinion is it's only good for carrying the rest of the equipment. Apart from that, it's useless. It can't hold stuff very well. It's not lined, which means it's not waterproof. The rest of the equipment isn't waterproof, but then again, that's not much of an issue. But when the thing that's meant to be holding your dry kit, for example, isn't waterproof, it's a bit of a bad design. For example, the 44 pattern one was rubber lined and was useful in that way. And in general, it's so badly designed. The flap itself doesn't come down tight enough. Anything can fall out or come out the sides, and I've had experience of that many times wearing it. Anything can come out of it. It pulls horribly on the shoulders because it basically uses 1-inch straps and that hook onto the webbing itself, so it doesn't really support itself very well, and it digs into your sides. And an issue with regarding the early pattern of 58, there was no tabs that the actual straps slotted through on the actual shoulders, which again we'll get into when we look at the later pattern. Sorry if you can hear the dog. Which meant it slipped off the shoulders. That meant it's very uncomfortable. And all in all, it's a very, very bad design of pack. Why you see guys in Borneo, for example, still using 44 pattern haversacks or whatever, or just going over to Bergens in general, because this is useless. It was still part of the equipment. It still had to be issued, and was still issued, which is why you probably use it when they're moving stations, like they're moving barrack to barrack or whatever it may be. It's good for carrying stuff in that sense, as more like a duffel bag kind of situation. But as a general pack to be used on the move, it's dreadful, absolutely dreadful. It has cross piece here for holding the helmet, cross straps here, specifically for holding the helmet. There's no other use for them, unlike say with the earlier 37 pattern or 08 pattern large packs or valises, where that was part of the actual how you would secure the actual L straps. This is just generally there just to hold the helmet. So that way it is good for that. And if you, again, for marching order, if you're going from one station to another, it's good for that. Apart from that, in the field, it's useless. So that's one thing. But moving away from the package, you see the entrenching tool is attached to it with basically like a pin system. So it's got a little pin which locks into a hole in the actual handle itself. Then it's secured by a pull tab, so it's quickly, easily deployed. Going down from there, we have the kidney pouches. So the kidney pouches, basically, with the initial design, one was to hold the water bottle and some other bits, and the other your mess tins. Again, it just went to you fit in there what you could. So mess tins, whatever it may be, spare like dry socks, whatever it may be, rations. Some units, it could be extra link for your general purpose machine gun, which again was another thing introduced at the same time this was to the British Army, as was the L1A1 SLR self-loading rifle. All these things were introduced to the British Army around the same time, so all of them sort of came together to be sort of what it was really. So for this new sort of model of fighting soldier for the British Army. modernised, getting away from bolt-action rifles and 303 chambered firearms in general. Obviously, the Vickers machine gun was obviously kept in service until 1968, but that's beside the point. Getting back to the equipment, as I said, these are the kidney pouches, or storage pouches, but they're kidney pouches in general, as standard. Again, quick release tab. They have a slightly strange method of attaching to the equipment, but they're designed to be quick release. So if you need to get rid of them for whatever reason, if you are wanting to access your rations or whatever it may be quickly, if you have medical provisions or whatever it is, or equipment in here, it's easy access. Or as I said, like with the new type of weaponry the British Army was using, if you had, say, a pod section who was supporting the gun team, so with the GPMG or whatever it may be, he might have an extra 1 or 2 belts of 50 round 7.62 in here, and he could quickly undo these, take this off the belt with these 2 quick release tabs. If you can see here, and I can find it. Where is it? I'll spin it around here. Here we go. So these quick release tabs here. So here, pull that, and it all comes off. And with the first and second issue patterns, there was no locking tab at the top here on the pouches, as we'll see in the later, if you're familiar with 58. Basically, later 58 has locking tabs to make it more secure to the yoke itself, because the early ones had a tendency to sag away from the body, as you can see. They tend to sag a bit. Again, if you want a more detailed look into each pattern and each issue, I'd say check out Rifleman Moore's videos on the actual progression 58 itself. I'll put a link in the description to those videos, because they're brilliant. They're really, really good, and they give a bit more of an inside detail. But this is a general look over at 58 in general. As I said, yeah, they tend to sag away from the body, so those would change on later issue, as we'll get into in later videos. But again, that's the reason for the quick release system, is so you can easily get these off for whatever reason you see fit, or for whatever reason it may be. And also, otherwise, it's a very, very complicated system otherwise. I've seen people suggest that they need to be fully secured to the actual belt, with like these complicated systems of keeping, like, yes, you might want to keep them secured, but if the main reason, if they weren't meant to have a quick release system, why didn't they just introduce it on the same system that these fix to the belt, or the water bottle fixes to the belt? Why would you go through this weird, strange system of like this tab system, if you weren't wanting to have him a quick release? That's my main thing. If that was the reason in the first place, then why wouldn't they like that? But again, Simon from Rifleman Moore channel focuses on that as well in a video where he looks at a video from a kind of like a prepper channel. But again, we're going off the point again. Keep getting distracted. So that's the kidney pouch itself. Below that is the poncho roll. So the poncho roll, for its obviously in its name, poncho roll, bum roll, whatever you want to call it, holds the poncho, roll mat, rain cape, later MBC kit as it comes into the late 60s, early 70s. You see that bit, you see being carried in there. But generally it's to hold that equipment, mainly the poncho, obviously for keeping you dry. And it's actually quite, when you haven't got the trenching tool cap, it sort of acts like a little seat when you sit down, so it's actually quite comfortable. The main idea around 58 was to keep stuff above the waist. Again, like with a lot of equipment, that still falls beside the waist-side kind of thing after a while, and stuff gets sort of piled on to the soldier, and they end up carrying more than it was designed for, really, and things being adapted, etc. As I said, you've got the shovel. This shovel itself is a 1983 dated shovel, but it's basically the same as anything. The British Army was still using the larger GS shovels at this point, but they wanted a more portable entrenching tool for the soldier and an easier way of carrying it. So that's why they have this system. As I said, exactly the same tab system here is on the top part of the actual back pad of the yoke. You could probably just see it here. We'll look at that in a minute when I take this off, and we'll look at some other bits. But again, it was so the soldiers can carry entrenching tools, etc., and digging equipment and anything like that much more easier than, say, during the Second World War, when they were just shoving a gear shovel through their belt or through the back of their large pack. where it is useful to carry, but it's a bit more uncomfortable that way. And when the actual entrenching tool that's with the equipment isn't exactly adequate for large digging rolls. It's for some self scrapes like that. Apart from that, nothing really good else. As I said, the shovel. Sometimes you see these covered with Hessian, so sort of stop the reflection, whatever. We've covered the poncho roll itself. As I said, it can be secured here to keep the head and that in line, really. This part, as I said again, is to contain the head of the pickaxe, and there's other little bits here, and you can see. So on the back itself, you can see these tabs here with these clips. These are to attach to the base on these D rings of the pouches, as I explained when we were looking at the first issue pouch. The same thing goes for the large pack as well. There's these clips that attach at the top D rings, where the yoke is attached to the pouch, to keep those secured to the body and to keep it all basically in this sort of cube, to keep it all centralized, to keep it nice and sturdy on the actual equipment. In general, in that design, it's very, very good. It's very, very good. But the pack is where it drops. If the pack itself was separate to the equipment, in that sense of it used the same system as the earlier ones did, then it'd be very, very good. But because of the way it attaches, like for example, the 37 and the 44 pattern large, like haversacks and large packs, etc., used L straps, and they were 2-inch wide straps that could be worn on their own, and they were very comfortable. When you've got this 1-inch strap, which is very much cutting into the shoulders, it's very, very bad. And the dog is just started moving, and she's now making noise. Over there. And now she wants to say hello. Bless you. Over there. Over there. I have to cut this out now, but over there. Sorry. So as we spin it around here, so that's moving away from the back. As I said, everything's secured and wants to keep in this sort of cube shape. As looking at the early start part of things, there was gas equipment obviously at the time. The British Army was still issuing lightweight respirators, or they're beginning to issue the S6s, especially in the late 60s. But there wasn't really like anything to carry them in that was issued with the 50 at the time until it becomes more used in the late 60s. Again, the biological and chemical warfare stuff was sort of beginning to come to its own within the 60s, and gradually into the 70s it becomes very much a thing within the British Army. But there's this sort of build up. You don't really see the 58 pattern pouches or bags for S6 respirators or whatever being issued until, well, Northern Ireland really in 1969. So that's one of those things. What do you want? So yeah, so looking back at the pouch, the left-hand pouch, we see the bayonet. As said on the actual pouch we looked at earlier, the frog is kept on the bayonet, is kept on the actual pouch itself, and the bayonet for the L1A1 SLR is kept on the side here. That is basically it. Sorry if I rambled on and got distracted by the dog, but it's just what happens here. There's nothing really much else to say. As I said, once sort of this main part finishes, I'll do some closer-up shots of getting some certain items in, like for example how the kidney pouches attach, how that works, especially with the earlier issue stuff, how it's different to the later. So we'll look at that. We'll look a bit closer at the way the large pack attaches to the webbing and some other little bits here and there. But again, thank you so much, and then we'll cut to the later bits. So see you in a bit. Okay, so here we have sorry about the shadow, of the buckles, or the clips I should say. This one's a bit more tighter. Oh no, we've managed to force that one open a bit more, which is good. But yeah, so it sort of comes over the shoulder, either keeping on or whatever, and then clips into here. A horrible, horrible way of carrying equipment. Absolutely dreadful. Whoever thought of this should have been reprimanded or taken to the Hague for crimes against humanity, personally, because it's absolutely dreadful, and it just hangs horribly. This is tightened up as far as quite far. It just, with any weight, it just sags and it just pulls everything down. And again, with the earlier issue stuff, I didn't really touch on this with the yoke itself. You'll see on the later ones when we get into that video, there's a tab that goes across here, which this would thread through on the later issue stuff. Earlier stuff, no. So which meant this is a tendency, as I said, to fall away, and then it would unhook itself, and then it would just be uncomfortable if it fell, and most of the time it did. Here we can see the actual part on the back I told you about, which is the same as here, on here, which is for the head, which is for the handle of the entrenching tool itself. So if you weren't wearing the large pack, and most of the time you wouldn't be, and thank God you weren't, if you want to carry the shovel, again, most of the time in West Germany on exercise or things like that, you'd be carrying the entrenching tool up here in this belt here. And I said if I undo this, so it'll be like a tab system. If I undo that, all this comes apart, and there's that pin that goes through the handle of the entrenching tool. So you'll probably see that if I go in here. Sorry about the light. So it basically, the little pin goes through here in the handle. So through the handle, and then it all clips into place and keeps it so it doesn't move around. It's basically, the main thing is because with the shovel, with the small shovel, the actual tabs keep it a bit in place, and as well as a little pin. But with the actual helve of the pickaxe, there's no like cross handle to keep it in place, so it could slide. That's why that pin comes in useful, to keep all that in place. And it is quite a good system. However, later when guys weren't really carrying the shovels and all this sort of stuff, and sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't, depending on what sometimes you see these just strapped onto a Bergen. When you have a Bergen pressing against this pin decides to start digging into the back. So a lot of guys just cut this off, kept these little tab bits so they can attach another poncho roll. But again, we're getting to that into the later video. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, sort of thing. Quickly go around to the front, so we'll have a little bit of a closer look. As I showed in previous videos, the tabs for the inside, so you could, when you open the actual flap of the actual pouch, it pulls up the magazines as you open it. So it's a really clever design, but again, was removed just because of simplicity and it wasn't really needed. And the pouches were just widened, so you could put more mags in, etc. On the side of the large pack, which we probably should have covered already, these little extra pockets, useful in a way, pointless really again. It's such a poor design. So I'm showing bits of the room. Such a poor design, it doesn't really help with situations really. But again, that's that in itself. We'll quickly get on to getting this off, and I'll show you the sort of more inside of the bits. Okay, so here we go. So as you can see, it's a very strange system that's all sort of up here. So you have the yoke coming down. Here's the actual sort of main back top of the shoulder pad itself, and the actual shoulder straps of the yoke are actually padded, so it's a bit more comfortable. Some guys put even more padding on here, it depends, and sometimes in the belt as well, especially in the later part of its issue. And then the yoke comes down, attached to the belt. You see these little D-rings, if you can see, which on here at the bottom of the belt, which for attaching the poncho roll here. And then we see the actual back on the inside of the kidney pouches. So you can see there's like a quick release system. So these little D-rings, everything passes through. These tabs come over, lock into points here. Again, as I said, Simon did a very good video on covering this. Lock into here, and then this could be pulled thusly, and then all of this removed, and then these can be detached very quickly. Very, very good system for that sort of thing. The later issues, as we're getting to, had extra tabs up here, and locking parts, to then be attached here, to then make it less likely to sag away from the body and make it more comfortable. But all in all, quite a clever system, really. But that's that basically. You know, all the rest of them use C-clips, like their earlier counterparts of 37 and 44, to attach to the belt. And that's basically it in a nutshell, really. Very, very simple, but very, very clever at the same time. And most things, you do the quick release, like on the poncho roll, like on the kidney pouches, etc. So it's a very, very clever and well-designed system in that sort of way. It's very, very, very ahead of its time for its introduction in the late 50s, really, with the sort of how it gone, and then with its later iterations into the mid and the late 60s, with the third issue stuff, you've got more thought out designs of things. And then we're getting to more of that sort of things when we get into that. So when I cover that. I'll talk about the anti-gas stuff as well, and sort of the introduction of those certain carrying equipment, etc. But apart from that, thank you very much. Thank you so much for watching this video. Again, sorry if I rabbited on a bit too much and getting sidetracked about different things, but we got there in the end. And if you lasted this long, appreciate it. If you want to give a like or whatever in the bottom of the video, much appreciated. And again, apologies for the dog interrupting, as she has now again. But it's one of those things, I don't really mind. So, if you like this video, as I said, if you want to like, whatever, put a comment down below. Any tips, tricks, or anything, much appreciated. And if you want to subscribe, much welcome. Well, that's much welcome. So, yeah, really appreciate anything, any support, etc. And if you want to stay tuned for the next one, again, we'll be looking, as I said, into the later stages of the 58 Patterns issue. So mainly the third issue stuff. So how you see it in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, and going forward, basically up until the end of the Cold War kind of deal. And how that evolved, and how troops adapted their equipment to suit the different style of warfare that was going on at the time. And also to sort of basic to requirements of what they needed, and more personalised it as well, going more towards the sort of personalisation of kit as you see today, and away from the sort of have it how you've been told to by the manual kind of thing, which obviously was done, and depending on the different regiments, battalions, or even company, or even platoon level kind of thing, of how your commander or whoever it be would tell you how to set your equipment up. But at the same time, it began to become more of a thing of like, guys have it as they want it, which was something seen in Malaya and Borneo. Guys carrying equipment of how it suited them, and then that became more of a culture later on, as you'll see it, especially into the Falklands, you'll see it definitely. But again, that's a video for another time, and hopefully not another 4 months away. So again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye for now.